Welcome to Slate Church. We are so glad that you're tuning in today and pray that wherever you are, this message will bless you. If this impacts you in any way, we would love to hear about it. Send an email to mystory@slatechurch.com.
We clap a lot in church because, as Paul says, he wrote 2/3 of the New Testament. He said that when we honor one part of the body, the entire body is honored. And so we just like to honor people. We like to celebrate who they are. And so if you're wondering, why do we keep clapping for everything? It's because we need to celebrate what God's doing in the city of Waterloo. And my name's Brandon Richardson. Luke mentioned earlier that we all pastor together. So in case you're confused, this is Luke. Give a wave, Luke. This is Victoria. They're married, because that would be a kind of awkward setup. And then, if they weren't, and this is my beautiful wife, Emma. We've been in the middle of a relationship series for this is our 4th week. And I also think it's pretty cool because this is the first series we've ever done as a church. We're only 27 weeks old, but we also used a different speaker for every message in the series. And I'm just thankful to be a part of a church that's not building on an individual, but on the Word of God and on good leadership and good culture and in the name of Jesus. And so we're really excited to be here. But over the past 3 weeks, this is our 4th week, we've been talking about relationships, and our whole series was titled Love. Really original, I know. We came up with it, not the creative team. We're like, just put love on the screen, okay? Everybody will get it. And tonight we're gonna continue that. This past week, we put up a question on Facebook and said, if you have any questions about relationships, submit them anonymously, and we're going to answer them today. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be hitting a lot of different topics today, and we're really excited to do that. And to start us off, I just wanted to give you a bit of a background into where we're going this morning. You're going to hear a lot about St. Patrick's Day because it's really important to us as a church. And yesterday, there was a lot of people. There is a memory coming. Yesterday, we were there, and I heard it from quite a few people volunteering that they were proposed to, that they were asked if they'd be their husband or wife. And I thought this was amazing how quickly people are willing to just get into relationships when they're inebriated. And it made me remember last year myself. I was walking through the crowd. I have a pregnant wife at home. Actually, I think you were there. And she's just manning the station. She's pregnant. And I'm on the phone with her. She's like, "Where are you? I'm trying to find you." And I'm talking to her on the phone, and somebody in the St. Patty's party was hanging off of me, trying to kiss me. And I'm like, "Hey, can you just give me a second? I'm trying to talk to my pregnant wife." And I'll get to you in a second. So I hang up. "Hey, what do you need? Will you kiss me?" "No, I'm not going to kiss you." And so there is obviously a need. Now, we're not going to judge people at their worst on how they view relationships. That wouldn't be fair to them. But there is a need in our society to talk about relationships in a healthy way. And often, the way that we're raised up is we start out very dependent on the people that are raising us, and we quickly move to being independent of those who we were dependent on. And the sad thing is that a lot of people stay independent. They think that that's when you've made it, when you've become independent of those around you. Well, a great guy named Stephen Covey points out something very interesting. He says, listen, the goal isn't to move from dependencies to into independency, but the goal is actually to move yourself into interdependency, where you're actually reliant on the people around you. So whether you are in a romantic relationship today, whether you're in a friendship, a working relationship, I really believe that the questions that we're going to be answering today are going to be valuable to you because we are an interdependent people, and we're dependent on the people around us. Is that cool? Now, this morning we're going to talk through a lot of different stuff, and we're not going to get too much into the specifics because I find that every situation is different. And if we opened up everybody's hearts here, everybody would have, well, what do I do in this situation? What do we do? And I just want to remind you that we're going to be principle-based today. We're going to set a solid foundation through these questions. And yesterday, as I was reading the Bible verse of the day on the YouVersion app, it talked about wisdom. And I can just imagine somebody asking the writer of Proverbs, just asking him like, hey, how do I get wisdom? And I love how the writer of Proverbs actually answers this. It says, the beginning of wisdom is this, get wisdom. And it's like, that's like the worst answer ever. I'm literally asking, how do you get wisdom? And they're like, just get it, you know? And so this morning, what we are going to be talking about is through a lot of principles relating. How do we become interdependent on one another? And I'm really excited for it. So Emma's going to lead us through the questions today. Are you excited? Yeah. Let's do this.
Awesome. So, I don't think my mic is on. I don't know.
Hello? Yeah, it's on. Actually,
All right.
I sound better through this mic.
They're playing tricks.
I'm going to keep this mic.
All right. That's all right. That's all right. All right, so we have a bunch of questions that we are going to go through today. So as Brandon said, we're not going to be able to get so in-depth with them, but I thought we would start off with a really easy one, really basic one. The question is, what should I be looking for in a partner, and what should I be doing for a partner that might be looking for me? Right?
Business partner?
No, I think they're talking romantic relationship. Okay. You see, these questions are going to be quite varied. So some of you might be sitting here and you're like, I have an established marriage. I've been married for a long time. There's going to be some questions for you. Some of you are sitting here and you're like, I'm single and I don't know what's going on with relationships. I don't know. There's questions for you. And so we're going to answer kind of a wide range of questions this morning. So they're not all going to apply. All right. So what should I be looking for in a partner, and what should I be doing for maybe a partner that's looking for me?
I think before you ever start to look for something else in another person, start to look at who you are as a person yourself, right? The truth is, a healthy relationship starts with a healthy you, right? Yeah. And so if you're just looking for, and I spoke about this briefly last week, if you're just looking for someone else to complete you, you know, your brokenness or your whatever, it's not going to be a healthy relationship. So actually, before you even begin looking for someone else, turn the magnifying glass on yourself and start to ask yourself, all right, who am I as a person? Who am I becoming? Do I have purpose in myself, who I am? Am I healthy in myself? Am I strong and secure in who I am as a person? Because I believe if you do that first, then you're going to enter into a relationship and you can build on a strong foundation. And it'll actually be so much better for it. And I think the truth is a lot of people in relationships, they look for, what everybody thinks a relationship should be. They look for like, oh, it should be perfect. We're never going to fight with each other. We're never going to have a single argument. We're never going to disagree on anything ever, which we can attest on this couch. It is just not true, okay? It is just not true.
You're describing us.
Yeah, well, that's right. We spent a lot of time together, you know. But it's just not going to happen. Yeah. And I think the truth is, why don't you, before you start to look for something in someone else, start to become the type of person that you would want to date, right? Become who you would actually want to date. I've talked to a lot of people, and they're like, here's my list for what I want in a person, you know. Boom, boom, boom. They list off like all these things that are like absolutely unrealistic expectations. Yes. And then I always ask, okay, what of those do you actually fulfill as a person, right? You're not going to attract somebody that you want all of these things if you're not able to, make your bed every single day when you wake up, right? And so I think, listen, a healthy relationship starts with a healthy you. Yeah. But, yeah.
I was just going to say very, very briefly on that. Also, a practical thing that you can look for, something in the Bible that Paul talks about is the fruit of the Spirit, right? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Yeah. These things can be broken down into a lot of other things. But look for that in a partner. Look for that in a potential partner. Are they living at the fruit of the Spirit? That's going to let you know, are they living a godly life? Are they pursuing God? Because that's fruit that they're going to see in their lives. But don't just use it as a checkbox. Either they have kindness or they don't. Everyone is going to get angry sometimes and be mean sometimes, okay? Look for it more as, is this apparent often in this person's life, and am I also pursuing that? Is that apparent in my life? Do I have self-control? Do I have faithfulness in my life? What am I doing to foster that?
Yeah. I would just add that compatibility has become a word that has been so overused in our society today. I got to find someone I'm compatible with. It's like, well, okay, great. I'm I'm going to suggest that you don't need to find somebody who you're compatible with as much as you need to find somebody who you're willing to become compatible with. Because if you think before you're married you're going to be completely compatible with that person, you're going to wake up the day after your wedding day and be like, who the heck did I marry? Because they're different the day after your wedding day. They're different. The woman I'm married to now is very different than the girl I was dating, and I'm thankful for that. She's a much better person. I'm a much better person, and at least I hope so. And so in order to find somebody you're willing and you're committed to becoming compatible with, you have to have trust and commitment as a part of your relationship, and then you should be good.
All right, let's keep going here. How do you remain content in singleness? That's a good question. How do you remain content in singleness?
I don't know. I was never very good at this.
I think a good one with that. I think a
It's
good one
true.
when it comes to being single, though, is actually, it's not a disease. You're not a bad person if you're single. It just means you haven't met someone yet. So I think the good thing is actually just to focus on you. That's an amazing season to be in. Actually, though, like some people sometimes are like, I'm single. It's like, don't even like, they feel like it's a disease. It's something that's happened to you. You need to get rid of your singleness. But it's actually an amazing season to be in. You're able to really grow relationship, good friendships. You're able to spend time with your parents, your siblings, really focus on your career. Lay that foundation already like in your singleness, and because that's actually what you take with you even when you get married later on.
All the problems that we face in our relationship are a direct result of the things I didn't work on before I got into our relationship. No, that's actually a true statement. And so if you think that singleness is somehow, as you're saying, a disease, take what Luke said. Work on yourself before you get into a relationship, because you will have to work on those things one way or another, and it's way better to become that person before you get tangled up with somebody else. Mm-hmm. Literally tangled up, you know what I mean? Yeah.
All right.
As I'm feeding off of some immaturity on the front row here.
Yeah,
That's right.
absolutely.
That's right.
I'm just as immature.
All right, so this one kind of can stem off of the last one that we just talked about. Someone asked, is it okay to be friends with some of the opposite sex? How do you make sure the other person isn't getting the wrong idea?
If you want to meet someone, I do suggest that you're friends with people from the opposite sex. So start with that one.
I'm going to ask this one at the same time. I have a great friend who I think has developed feelings for me. Should I talk to them about it? So it's this kind of, how do I make sure if I just want to be friends with this person, that I'm just friends with this person? We had questions about, can we be friends with people that, without being in a relationship, all these kinds of things. So let's speak to that a little bit.
That's a good question. I think that's great. Just off of that, if you think someone has feelings for you, whatever, it's complicated, all that kind of stuff, just uncomplicated, okay? Talk to that person, right? I think that I meet people all the time.
I gotta say, texting is not talking, okay? Texting is not talking, so make sure you're talking.
And coffee doesn't mean marriage.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah,
Take somebody out for coffee. It doesn't mean you're going to marry them. And if you see people out for coffee, it doesn't mean they're getting married.
Yes.
Yeah.
My gosh.
Yeah, it's true.
Cool it.
It's true.
I don't know.
Cool down, everybody.
Holy
Yeah.
smokes.
Anyways.
But really, talk to the person. Be like, what's going
So
on
many coffee
between
dates
us?
after this.
Right? What's going on between us? I think that honesty is the best policy here. Just have the conversation and see what's going on. But listen, again, I think when you're single, again, there's nothing wrong with being friends with people of the opposite sex, all right? It's great. It's a good way to meet people. It's a good way, hang out with people, fantastic. I think it's wonderful. But I think that there is a shift once you get married, all right? And once you're in a committed relationship, I think there is a shift. The truth is, I don't think it would be very honoring to Victoria if I was spending more time with another female than I was with her. Just even, she's my best friend, right? I think that you're just headed down a road at that point where you're just headed towards a place that you don't want to be going. And to tell you the truth, it just wouldn't be honoring to our relationship in general. So I think that there is a shift that happens once you're in a committed relationship where it's actually, I would say it's quite difficult to be, best friends and be spending a whole lot of time with a member of the opposite sex. And I think it just comes down to living above reproach, right? It wouldn't look good if it looked like basically I was out for dinner with another woman other than Victoria. Even if we were just good friends and we knew that that's what the relationship was. But the truth is, somebody walks by the window of the restaurant and looks in and sees me with this other person. They have no idea. Suddenly, they're thinking what is going on, and they're talking and all this stuff. And so I think it's important there to live above reproach and actually guard yourself in some of those cases.
I mean, I get this question a lot when I'm talking to people one-on-one is how do I navigate these friendships? And I often say if your friendship would have to dramatically change if you were suddenly in a relationship with someone, then maybe that friendship is too close. If you're saying, I want to be in a romantic relationship, but not with this person who I'm very good friends with, I think it's important that you're not then hanging out with this person all the time, in one-on-one situations all the time, being intimate with your emotions with that person, with maybe spiritual things with that person, and there's that kind of intimacy taking place. If that would have to shift completely when you all of a sudden become in a romantic relationship, maybe it's a little bit too close. So just guard that. Totally fine to have friends, but make sure that you're aware of those things as you navigate that.
A good one, just aside to that, is that you don't flirt with friends. So if you're friends with people of the opposite sex, but you're flirting, then that's a different kind of friendship. So if you're friends, you're friends. Otherwise, you need to decide whether or not it's someone you're pursuing a relationship with. That's really good.
All right. Another question. People talk about putting your marriage first before your kids, but what does that actually look like practically? How do you actually do that? And I think we'll maybe speak to that a little bit. The reality is we have 2 small children, so we're not experts on this, but we have people that we look to who have gone before, who we've had conversations with about how do you do this? And the honest answer is it's not easy. Your kids take up a lot of your time, a lot of your thought, a lot of your effort, probably at no matter what age they are, whether they're 2 or whether they're 20. Sometimes that can be the case, right? But it's about making sure that you're carving out that time for each other, having date nights together. And you're going to go through different seasons of that, is that sometimes, and we've just been through this, when you have a really young baby that you are the food maybe for them, you can't leave them. You can't just go for hours on end and head out on a weekend away. But there's little bits of time that you can carve out and being intentional about that time. Great advice that we've heard and we also do ourselves is put your kids to bed. Our kids go to bed at 7:30, both of them, and then you actually have time in the evening to put effort in. So it's being careful that you're not too tired for one another, that you're not taking time. I'm really aware that there are people who live much busier lives than we do who consistently work on their marriage, and I think it's important to remember that it's like you can take that time. You can choose to take the time. Then there's other practical things like I'm a big advocate for when you're married to actually continue counseling in different seasons of your marriage and things like that. I think that's a really good thing, and we do that. And it's just an important thing. There's nothing to be afraid of in that. It's actually working on and investing in your marriage and investing in your family.
Yeah, you're married to your partner. You're not married to your kids.
Yeah.
And I think I've seen far too often married couples treating their kids like they're the ones they're actually married to. They're going to fly the coop at some point, and you're going to be left with the person that you didn't treat like your husband or your wife, and you're going to have to deal with the aftermath of your decisions while they were growing up. If you have a problem with your wife, I'm speaking from my perspective. If you have a problem with your wife, your kids aren't the people to talk to that about. They're your kids. They're not your spouse. If you're raising kids, they don't need to be your best friend because best friends don't discipline each other, and you need to discipline your kids. Keep your kids in the place that they're supposed to be, which is your kids, and your partner, your spouse, in the place that your spouse needs to be. Love them well, because the truth is that that's the person you're with for the rest of your life, and we need to be always building that.
I think something with that, my mom is actually here. She's visiting from Sweden.
Come on.
So exciting. We don't have kids yet, but something my parents always said, they've been pastoring for more than 30 years, and something they've always said that we came first. So if mom and dad are doing well, the kids are doing well. So I think that's also just prioritizing your marriage, that if you guys are doing well, the kids can feel that. I worked at a preschool for many years, and the kids, when the parents were going through a divorce, you can really see how it actually affects the kids. So if you guys are doing well as parents, the kids will be doing well. That's all they need, pretty much, and food and sleep and everything. Yep.
Exactly. Awesome. what are healthy boundaries in a relationship? What are some healthy boundaries in a relationship? And another question that probably follows in with this is the question, are there physical boundaries in a marriage relationship? So that's kind of a two-piece question.
Well, I mean, I think I've grown to believe that there's not only physical boundaries in relationships pre-marriage. Okay, we'll talk pre-marriage, then we'll go to marriage.
Yeah.
There's not only physical boundaries that we would like say, hey, this might be smart to like think about. And I guess that we did talk earlier that we were going to maybe just talk about a traditional Christian view of boundaries physically. The traditional view of relationships within Christianity is that you shouldn't sleep with somebody who's not your wife or your husband. And you know, that's not something that we would back off of and say like, you know what, now that we've grown up as a church, we're going to throw that one out the window. We're not going to do that this morning. But we need to understand what that actually means. What the Bible is saying and what we derive from the Bible is that there's times and seasons for everything. And if you're not married, that's not the time or season for that thing. A lot of people will say, well, like we're mature enough to have sex with one another. And then to which I say, well, then go get married if you're mature enough. Like, this isn't that hard. Like, if you can hold down a marriage. Like, I mean, I think it's trying to say, like, don't give yourself away to too many people before you get married, so that there is, one of the best things is that if I'm traveling, Emma never has to fear that I'm going to do something stupid while I'm away. And it's because I've always been faithful to her, and I've only been faithful to her. Does that make sense? Like, I've only had sex with you. You've only had sex with me. And that's a beautiful thing, because those temptations and urges that come up within us, I'm not going to act on that because I didn't act on it before we got married. Like, in the height of being a teenager, I didn't act on that. And it established a level of trust before we even got married. So there is a level of trust no matter where we go, and we're not questioning it. We're able to live freely. And some of you, unfortunately, you're carrying a lot of burden because there is not that trust level, that trust foundation. Now, that doesn't mean that you're damaged goods. It doesn't mean that you can't get over that. It means none of those things. But what the Bible is trying to say is there's a time and season for everything, but the time and season for that is in marriage. Now, there's not only physical boundaries, there's also emotional boundaries, and there's also a whole lot of other spiritual boundaries and whatever else. The reason why, again, there's a time and season for all these things as well. And I know so many guys, I sit down and talk with you, this is across the board, and you're worried about some of the stuff that you did in your past. And mainly it's stuff that you've looked up online. And you're scared to tell your significant other. But you come and you ask that question. You've been out on like one date, and you're like, when do I tell this person this? And I'm like, hold up. You don't even know where this relationship is going. You don't need to open up about everything that's ever gone in your life in order for you to be an honest person. Wait until the season has come where you have traded off stories enough where you haven't given too much of yourself when that person's just been reserving all of their selves. It's a little bit like walking through St. Patty's and this girl's hanging off my shoulder. It's like, you are giving me way more than what I'm giving you right now. And sometimes you see this within relationships. It's like, oh my gosh, one person is just giving them their entire self to somebody. And it's like, slow down. Yeah. Make sure that they're returning the serve. Make sure that they're willing to play this game. Make sure that they're not trying to take advantage of you. Because as soon as you unlock a secret in your heart or a secret in your life to them, and they're not willing to reciprocate, that is something they have on you, and immediately trust begins to crumble. And so there's a time and season for everything, and honesty doesn't mean on the first date you need to open up everything. What you need to figure out on the first date is whether or not you're going to have a second date. Leave it at that, okay? Now maybe we could talk about boundaries within marriage.
Well, let me just talk about that as well.
Yeah.
Boundaries when you're dating, all right? If we just get like really practical, boundaries in dating. If you, the truth is, we are physical beings, okay? And you may think that you're above temptation, but I'm going to tell you right now, you are not, okay? If you're dating, you are not. Don't put yourself in a situation where something bad is going to happen.
That's good.
Put boundaries. I think they're important. Keep yourselves vertical together, all right? Listen, it's so easy to say, let's just lie down and cuddle together on the couch for a minute. And then, listen, that's mistake number one, okay? Or, yeah, I know that nobody else is in the house right now and it's 1 o'clock in the morning, but is it okay if I just come over? We're going to watch a movie. That's another mistake, okay? The truth is, it really is important to set these boundaries. There's nothing wrong with boundaries. It doesn't mean you're a weak person. It actually means that you're a strong person because you're willing to set them, all right? I want to encourage you to do that. Victoria and I, when we were dating, there was a time when we would hang out until after midnight together. And nothing was happening. It was fine. But I remember my roommate was telling me, like, Luke, it doesn't look great, the fact that you guys are hanging out that late. And I said, you're right, man. And so we set a 10 o'clock p.m. boundary. That was our curfew for ourselves, which may seem crazy to some people. But the truth is, we made that, not, my mother-in-law is saying not to her, that boundary might even sound a little bit late to her. But but listen, that boundary set us up for success later in life. And it's important to set those boundaries. I really think it's key.
And I think it's the thing that's coming across is that it's worth it. And whether in the past that you have found yourself that you have had sex with people, that you have. Listen, when you come into a relationship with Jesus, there is complete forgiveness, okay? There's complete forgiveness over any of your past, anything that's gone on, and there's redemption there. So I do not want any message to come across of, oh my gosh, I'm so guilty in this place, I should have so much shame, No, none of that needs to take place, okay? There is freedom in Christ.
That's right.
But it's worth it. Because the thing is that in a marriage relationship, when these things are, when sex and intimacy are outworked in their proper place, in the proper structure, that's where it can be two becoming one in such a beautiful way. And it can be such a good thing and such a positive thing. But I think it's also important just to talk briefly and say, it's not always that within a marriage these things are simple and easy and everything's great and everything. So it's not to put this image in your head if you're single, if you're not married, that all of a sudden you're going to cross this finish line of marriage and then all of a sudden this physical intimacy is going to be fantastic all the time and so great and so lovely and all the rest of it. Again, talking about seasons. There's challenges that you might face, and I think it's important to talk about in all these elements of romantic relationships is not to do relationships alone. Okay, we need people in our lives that we trust, that can speak in, that we can come to honestly and say, hey, this might feel a little awkward, but this is what's going on here. And this isn't working out the way we thought it would. And this looks a little bit different than what we expected. Or maybe when you're in a relationship before marriage and you're saying, hey, we're struggling with this. This is something that we're finding challenging. People can come alongside you and keep you accountable and give you some advice and things like that. You might have to get creative in some of these things. I remember a season that we went through where we didn't hang out together without worship music on, okay? Because you're not going to start making out when you're
Joel
listening
Houston
to Joel Houston
the speakers.
singing through. You might have to get a little creative,
but
but it's worth it is what I'm saying. It's worth it, and there's not shame, there's not condemnation coming
Now,
through.
there was that second question,
Yes,
boundaries
that's a good
within
one.
marriage. And I think actually it's helpful to borrow a definition for a second. The definition of justice is treating each thing as it ought to be treated.
Yeah.
That is the most basic philosophical definition of justice, treating each thing as it ought to be treated. So you can be unjust to a plant. If a plant's just sitting there, the city of Waterloo has come by, they just groomed this plant and put all the mulch around it and all the rest is looking great, and you see somebody, they're just walking across the road, they see this plant, they just boot it, you're like, hey, you just didn't treat that thing as it ought to be treated. You're a little unjust to that plant. So when it comes to marriage, there are some things that you absolutely can cross boundaries on because you're supposed to treat each thing as it ought to be treated in all facets of life. And so what we talk about when it comes to treating things with injustice is there's been a perversion of justice. We're not talking about perverted people, just a perversion of justice. There is no way that a fight should ever end physically in a marriage. It just shouldn't happen. That is a good boundary on what it means to actually work things out. That should never happen. There should never be hands laid on one another. When it comes to your bedroom, I'm not going to make up these things for you. I'm not going to tell you what to do in your own bedroom. But just keep in mind that there's a way that things should work and the way that things shouldn't work. When it comes to coming and discussing what's on your heart for your marriage and spiritually and whatever else, there is times where Emma's exhausted. She's been feeding Theo all day, and she just needs a break. That might not be the time where I need to lay on everything that I need help with because that just isn't the right time. That's not treating her with a sense of justice. And so there are boundaries in relationships and marriages that we ought to discover. And if you're questioning what those boundaries should be or whatever else, it's probably a good thing or a good indication that you need to talk to somebody about it. So just talk to somebody about it, whether it's, again, we're proponents of counseling because you can ask your counselor anything, they're not telling anybody. So that's a good place to deal with that as well.
And I think one, though, that can be helpful is knowing that marriage is between two people. So we were told long ago that marriage is between two people, right? And so bringing someone else into the relationship, even mentally, can be crossing a boundary, right? Where's your mind at when you're with your spouse and things like that?
And are you honoring the other person, right? So I think this is big. In a marriage relationship, the boundaries. Are you honoring that person? All right, if we're talking about the bedroom for a second, all right? Is what you're doing there, is it honoring to your spouse? Does it honor them or does it not? You know, there's a great quote that love gives and lust demands, right? And so we always need to make sure that we're actually in a loving relationship. And you need to know that, and this goes for everybody actually, that love will always cost you something. Love always costs. Love that doesn't cost is just a feeling, right? It's just a feeling. And so we need to make sure that our relationships are honoring one another and honoring God at all times. And so I think that that's very important within a marriage, that we're honoring God with our relationships and we're honoring each other with relationships. Again, we're not going to get up here and tell you what to do and what not to do, whatever. But you need to make sure that, listen, consent is still valid within a marriage, all right? That's really important to know as well. And what you're doing in the bedroom, is it honoring your spouse, or is it dishonoring them? Is it honoring God, or is it dishonoring God? And that's really important as well in terms of just setting and maintaining boundaries within a marriage-type relationship. That's important. So,
this is a good question. How do you share mental health struggles with loved ones, especially if they are fearful or unable to help? And I get this question a lot when I sit down and talk to people who are dealing with depression, anxiety, various other mental health difficulties, and they will often say, you know, my parents, they don't get it. They think that this is just made up, or you know, a friend, they just totally turned their back on me when I told them this. And I think that the reality is, if people are fearful or they don't get it, or they it can be difficult, but it's okay to actually say that. If you want to share this with especially family and what you're going through, it's okay to say, hey, I know you might not understand this. Hey, I know this might be challenging for you to hear, but it's important for me to actually verbalize it, actually share it. And this might not be the person who is your key support person, okay? But if you're a person sitting in here and you're going, I'm a little bit afraid if someone were to come to me and say that they were depressed. I don't know what to do. I'm not trained in this. I don't know how to help them. The best thing you can do is listen. Love them, encourage them, be there for them. But if you don't feel like you are capable of walking alongside, it's not about brushing them off, but it's about saying who in your life is able to walk with you through this. So it's a both and. But if you're fearful or afraid of that, maybe you don't talk to them by yourself. Maybe you have someone with you. Maybe you already know things that you're striving for and working on yourself. But maybe don't have the expectation that that person is going to be a key person that you can go to about this, but still be willing to talk about it. And they might not respond well. That's not on you. That's on them. So
people are fearful of what they don't understand.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the very root of racism. It's just, if we keep on either sides of each other, we can just remain fearful and hateful towards one another because we just haven't had a conversation. And I think with mental health, often it's just a fear because they don't understand it. I think that education in our society around mental health is actually going up. So I can imagine that in a few years that this actually won't be the case. But remember, when we started dating, you were asking questions about hockey. Or rather, let's turn this around. You were into horseback riding, equestrian. She wasn't laying on me all the rules of equestrian the first time I asked about it. She was telling me, this is what a horse is. And I'm like, oh, great. That's great. That's good for my first lesson. Let's revisit this. With mental health, if the person doesn't understand, don't lay the entire thing on them because they're not going to understand. But it might be worth just starting the conversation so they can get to that place.
That's good. Awesome.
We have time for one more question.
definitely. Let's make it. What else we got?
Pulling it back up.
Yeah.
You guys want another question? Is that okay?
Guys, we have gone through almost all of the questions
What
that
else we got?
are looking here. You know what? I'll read the first question that was listed here. How long should a couple wait to get engaged? There might be a few dating couples in here who have this question.
Longer than you're currently thinking.
No. Do you want to talk to this one?
I think use wisdom for sure.
Yes.
We've talked about this.
There's
but
not a rule.
No, there's
Okay.
not a rule. Like every couple is different, but I usually would give the advice that it's good to have at least been dating for all the seasons. There's something about having had all the holidays, birthdays, maybe a good cold or a stomach flu. I had the flu before we got engaged. It was good for Luke to just take care of me. You know, you get to know a person a little bit better once you've had to actually help them just staying alive.
If you started dating a guy in May and he loves hockey and watches hockey I guess it would be June. Hockey goes on forever. And he loves hockey and watches every single game of the Maple Leafs. And you're like, I didn't know this about you. You got to get through that season. And no, Brandon doesn't watch every game at all by any means. But you need to get through that season and see if you're dating a guy and he absolutely loves to do whatever in the summer and you've only been dating him for 2 months and you don't know that. You go through every season, right? Learn about each other through every season. Give it some time, that kind of thing. But again, you don't have to. You don't have to. You could go through every season 5 times if you want to, or you could go through, right? Again, have people around you in your life who can speak into decisions that you're making, who can speak into and say, listen, if you see a red flag here, please let me know. It's better to know that before anyone who's married here can say, I'd rather you tell me that before I was married, right? Why come to me after I'm married and let me know, oh yeah, I think this was a bad decision. Now look at the road you get to walk. Give a red flag. But if you've been asked to speak into somebody's life, don't also just take that.
I think that's the important one, actually, even more than the time. Who do you have around you that you actually are allowing them to speak into your life? Friends and family. Are they actually on board? Do they think this is a good thing? Because if not, then that's something you need to work through before getting engaged. And I think, use wisdom.
Yeah, if you're always waiting for some far-off season to come until you can enjoy whatever stage of life you're actually in, then you're always going to be waiting for some far-off season to come to actually enjoy the life that you're supposed to be enjoying. And Emma and I were dating for 4 years before we got married, and I absolutely love being married to Emma, but I wish I could have just slowed down that whole process and even more. I would have still gotten married at the same time, but I wish that we had just enjoyed it more. I wish we had been not as much future focused. I wish we had just enjoyed not having kids and going out for dates whenever we could. Just a little bit more. I would have chosen the same timeline, but within that timeline, I just wish that we had appreciated it a little bit more, because it's only there once, so enjoy it. Don't rush life, because you only got one life to live, and it's been an incredible morning, hasn't it? I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
The entire purpose of us doing a relationship series is that we know that we are interdependent people, and that we rely on the people around us, whether it is in our workplaces, whether we're living with them, whether we're married to them, whether it's our kids, or whatever else. We rely on these relationships to actually find freedom to do what we believe that God's called us to do. And I think when we start a series, because we've only done one series in 27 weeks, so that means that was 23 weeks without a series. When we do a series, it's intentional because we want to lay a foundation for our church to move forward on. This isn't meant to just we'll just talk about relationships, get it off off our list of things we got to talk about, and then we'll move on. No, I mean, everything we talk about has to do with relationships, but we take this specific series because we want to lay a foundation that you could actually build your life on. I really believe that we could look back in 20 years from now as a church and be a church, for those that don't accept church, an organization, a group of people, a community, whatever they want to call us, that actually sets an example for our city of what healthy relationships look like. Whether that is, these roommates that go to Slate and they're just incredible. I got to check it out because My roommate situation isn't like this. This guy that I work with, his marriage is so healthy while the rest of ours are falling apart, but his is healthy. He goes to this place called Slate. Let's check it out. I hope that the way that we live out our interdependency within this church will actually be a beacon of hope for those in a society where relationships are crumbling and we don't know who to trust. I really believe that we can set this foundation. I really believe as we put these things into practice and we don't just allow a relationship series season to pass us, but we hold on to these and actually fight for it, we will actually have something to show a society, a city that is hungering to see how do I actually live with the people that are around me. So let's set that light. Let's set that beacon of hope. Let's be a church where people look to us and see healthy relationships. Remember, if we can't be healthy even in this place and not talk down on each other and not lift one another up and not do the great things that build church, there's no way that people are going to trust us with their hurt, their pain, their struggles, because we're a church for those who are far from God, right? All right, I want to quickly just talk on one more brief thing before we move on. And it has to do with why we all gathered here today. And we gather here not to just talk about relationships and pump up each other and whatever else. That's all great. I just talked about that. But we come because of a God that first loved us. And in John 3:16, it's a verse in the Bible. It just says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish, but have eternal life with God." Which means that we get eternal relationship with God. And I think this is one of the most fascinating things, because if you actually look on the building blocks of why we're here today and you look back in history, we've built off our entire societies off of these belief systems. Not just Christianity, but ancient world religions. And ancient world religions, just so you're aware, are actually more similar than they are different. They uphold a lot of the same values, a lot of the same ways that we should live out our lives and whatever else. And it should be encouraging to us, because it means that we're not alone. It's not like just Christianity thinks that we should live our lives in some certain way. But there's a major difference between Christianity and the rest of the world religions. And it's this. All the world religions tell you that in order to be right with the person or being or beings that control the cosmos, you've got to get right with them and you got to do a lot to make sure that they'll accept you. Christianity differs in saying that, you know what? Our God realized that we weren't too good at getting right with him, so he actually came down and paid the price for us so that we could spend eternity with him. It's the most revolutionary message you've ever heard, that Jesus actually paid the price for our sin that we could not pay for ourselves. And that's why we can be in freedom. That's why we can say, you know, if your relationships have been going bad, find freedom in Jesus, because we have the key to freedom in this place.
Thank you for watching. Again, if you were impacted by this message in any way, send an email to mystory@slatechurch.com. You can also visit slatechurch.com and fill out one of our online Connect cards. We would love to see you in person at one of our Sunday services. As well, you can stay connected with us by following us at Slate Church on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.